Yep.
So, what do you want to talk about? I guess you all have been wanting to meet with the department to address some issues.
But we can talk about Officer Weekly first.
Yes.
And just the nature of the.
Well, first, I want to make this distinction. This is Detective Weekly, who is the brother of Officer Weekly. And so I just want to make that distinction clear. Yes, I became aware of the matter, the posting in social media. I've taken very quick action. Let me just go through a bit of a timeline. One, I learned of this late Saturday, early Sunday. And once becoming aware of it, notified my team so that we could have a discussion. Based on a preliminary assessment of it, Detective Weekly has been appointed from the rank of detective down to a police officer, and he has been reassigned, and we have opened an internal investigation into this matter. Certainly, as you've heard me say time and again, we have worked so hard and continue to work hard in making sure we have great relationships with everyone here in Detroit. I praised the protesters on Friday, 1,500. You see the images in other parts of the country where crimes being committed. Folks here respect, the law and order. There's not one incident. And certainly I had a chance on that day to talk with some of the organizers who applauded the fact that we were there to keep them safe. Just like in Dallas police officers were there to keep the protesters safe. So they were very thankful for our presence and not one incident. And then on Saturday, I had a chance to meet with National Action Network. I know that they brought forth this allegation against now former Detective Weekly. I spent 3 hours having a discussion on how we could continue to build and enhance our relationship in the community. Very encouraging meeting. And so.
But they're calling for him to be fired.
I understand that there is something called due process. Certainly, very quick action, and not just reassigning him. He was working a special detective assignment, but he was deappointed or taken, downgraded from his rank back to the rank of police officer. So very quick action, but he is entitled to due process. We have launched an internal investigation. So we have to let that run. And that's by contract and certainly out of fairness. But we are firmly aware that he did post. He has since removed the post. But we recognize that it's still trending. And yes, we are concerned as an organization because it does have a tendency to undermine all of the good work that I just described that we're doing in the community. And so that's why it was important for us to take prompt action in dealing with this issue.
Chief, did we happen, the snippet that we saw, do you believe that we saw the full post? Did you get a chance to read the entire post?
That's, as far as I know, that's the post. I mean, we're going to, again, our investigation may disclose additional posts or information. I'm not certain. I just want to make sure that we're acting promptly. I've had a discussion with the mayor on this issue. He certainly supports everything that we're doing. So we're going to move forward.
Chief, talk about the responsibility that these officers have when they take their badge off and put the baseball cap on and they're at home. They're still very much the voice of
Absolutely.
the DPD. Right?
Still a voice of the DPD. Police officers, certainly, myself included, were held to a much higher standard. The public expects us, and when we voice an opinion contrary to the department's mission, the department goals, it's a problem. We've disciplined others in the past for similar acts. Certainly, social media can certainly be a friend, but if you want to inject personal opinions, then we will take quick and prompt action. In fact, I'll tell you in advance, we're looking at another troubling post by an African American, and I'm going to be following up with my staff on that shortly.
An officer?
Police officer?
A supervisor, African American. So probably haven't heard about it. I just was briefed on it minutes ago, and we're going to treat that the same. Race doesn't matter what race, gender. If you post something that's contrary to your role as a police officer, our oath of office, we will certainly take prompt and decisive action.
Can you talk about that at this point?
Not at this point, it's very early. Again, it's just minutes before I came down to meet with you. And so I'm meeting with my staff to understand, but what I saw so far is troubling.
In response, was it to another post that was
It
already
was,
causing issues?
it was certainly an issue. And let me just say this, and this is not an excuse. Our police officers are under tremendous pressure today, given that their colleagues, you've heard me say, you know, the attack on Dallas police officers is an attack on all of us. This is the biggest attack on law enforcement since 9/11, and the threat of additional attacks on police officers is real. You know that there have been several posts in social media identifying the killing of white officers. We have made 4 arrests, and we're in the process of submitting a warrant request to the prosecutor for felony in making a threat against killing a police officer. It's you know, there are a lot of issues here. First of all, I believe that when you make a threat like that, given more so in today's environment, that's a problem for me and for us in leadership positions. We have to resolutely support and provide unwavering support to the men and women who run to danger, not away from danger. I mean, you've heard some of the heroic stories coming out of Dallas where a police officer there to protect the rights of free speech and the protesters. When the shots began, there was a woman and child, and one was struck by gunfire, and the officer quickly threw his body on top of her to shield her and protect her. That's what represents law enforcement, and certainly that's what represents Detroit police officers.
These 4 people who have been since arrested for making these threats, were they all on social media, and are
All
the felony
social-
seeking felony charges for all 4?
Often, and I can tell you what we're looking at. There's one penal code section here in the state of Michigan. We believe the most appropriate is 750.411, posting message through electronic medium. What certainly jumps out is that the message results in a credible threat being communicated to the victim. Now again, we're going to submit this for charging recommendation for prosecutors. Ultimately, the prosecutor makes a decision. I have since had a conversation with the state's attorney general, Bill Schuette, so he's evaluating it as well. Very concerned. And the president said during a press conference subsequent to the horrific shooting deaths of the officers, and he said it, any violence directed at a police officer is a reprehensible crime. And so I know the president's taking a firm stand on that, and I think law enforcement leaders across this country, when you become aware of a threat to kill a police officer, there should be a timely response to that. And so I applaud the work of the men and women here who've gone out and quickly identified these suspects and taken them into custody.
Were they surprised, Chief? I mean, did they indicate that maybe that they didn't think it was that big of a deal, that, you know?
Given today's environment, and as an adult, it's a problem. So surprise, it was a joke. To me, our police officers are concerned. They come to work every day. They're still out there doing the job that they've been called to do. And so I take it serious. And certainly it's important for me as a leader of this great department to lead the way in saying that we're not going to tolerate a threat to kill a police officer.
Chief, there's 4 guys, 2 of them you guys held back because of outstanding warrants. Can you talk about that? Those outstanding warrants?
As far as I know, they're misdemeanor warrants. In fact, 2 were released from custody, but we're going to still pursue felony warrants, out of custody warrants. And we're just hopeful that the prosecutor office, if a determination is made that a crime was committed, that these individuals are charged.
How confident are you, Chief, in the
I'm not a prosecutor, and I don't want to speak on behalf of the prosecutor. Certainly, those decisions are solely the prosecutor's decision.
And for clarification, the individuals that were arrested, are they from the actual city or from elsewhere?
The people that we focused on are from the city. Now, we are aware of additional threats of a similar nature, threatening to kill police officers in outside areas. We have contacted the concerned jurisdiction, what we believe to be the appropriate investigative entity. But we can't, we're focused on Detroiters who are making that threat. And so we're going to continue to pursue it.
The supervisor that made this comment, was this morning, was it this weekend? And
I'm not certain. Again, this is so new.
Sure.
I am just getting briefed. My commitment, once again, whether it's Caucasian, African American, I'm colorblind to this, and so we're going to address it, and we're going to address it promptly, but we're going to also do it fairly. Everybody's entitled to due process. As I've said publicly many times, when you talk about an officer-involved shooting incident, let's not be quick to rush to judgment.
Chief, you have a suspect wanted for a crime in Detroit, a double murder that's now in Romulus. Have you been briefed on that? What do you know?
I will not talk about it. We're talking about a dangerous suspect, and I certainly don't want to compromise the work that our team are involved in at this point. So I'm not going to discuss it.
He's not in custody.
I'm not going to discuss anything about that case right
Chief,
now.
how are the men and women of the department doing at this point? Even Officer or Detective Weekly, it sounded like there was some frustration there. How are
Lots
they
of frustration, and again, it doesn't excuse we're professionals, and we have to always rise above. We're held to a much higher standard. This has touched everyone in our profession. You ask any police officer what they feel today about the loss of life. We're talking about 5 Dallas police officers. You know what was interesting, and I've been saying, echoing the words of the chief of police in Dallas. And what he said was, we don't often feel supported. Oftentimes we don't feel supported. I just hope that on this day, that we receive support. And then in reflection, I say, well, here's what's good about being Detroit. Here's what's good about being a police officer in Detroit. I steadfastly recognize that our community, they support us. They support the work of the men and women. And so when you look at what's going on here, the fact that we're reducing crime in part because of that relationship, the fact that we are having ongoing dialogue with people that we don't always agree with. In fact, I've been very clear, I have not always agreed with National Action Network. But I spent 3.5 hours this Saturday. I was encouraged. I applaud Reverend Williams for his work, and there's some things that we're going to be doing together. In fact, one thing I'm very excited about is that when we look at what occurred in Dallas, we're talking about a military veteran who may be suffering, who was suffering from PTSD, who for whatever reason went on a rant and decided to carry out this horrific violent act. So acting alone, could it happen anywhere else in America? Absolutely. Do we have veterans here in Detroit who are suffering from PTSD? Yes, we do. So we have decided, one thing that came out of our NAN meeting is that I met a young man who is a veteran, who is suffering, and has a strong willingness to work with the department and try to create a liaison so that our veterans can have a voice, so we can have a relationship with that community. Because what if? Could it happen here? Could it happen anywhere? You know, one of the things that's very troubling when the pundits talk about Dallas and suggest maybe that maybe Dallas didn't have a real good relationship between police and community. That's absurd. I mean, I know that chief. We've talked about the work that he's doing there, and to suggest that this lone person who engaged in this behavior, Dallas had a peaceful protest, much like what we had here on Friday. What if someone had acted alone and created the kind of situation that was in Dallas? Does that mean that we have poor police-community relations? So I applaud what we're doing here and certainly applaud this community.
Have you talked to the folks in Dallas? Have you talked to the chief?
I have exchanged text messages with him because but I didn't. I certainly wasn't going to call him when he's certainly inundated with the work ahead of them. But we have communicated.
So do you,
Last question.
do you characterize going back to the original posting on social media, how do you characterize it? Is it unprofessional or is it racist? or
Well,
what is it?
you know, it's a number of things. I mean, preliminarily, and I certainly don't want to pass full judgment, preliminarily it's certainly inappropriate, it certainly is unprofessional, and this is on the heels. I think what's troubling for me, here we are in a meeting on Saturday, meeting with National Action Network about some positive steps that the department and that organization can make together. And then what emerges is a post like this. A post like that tends to undermine the work that we're doing. It tends to have a negative impact on as we continue to build trust. And so I've been very candid and certainly transparent that when faced with these kinds of issues that we work very quickly to mitigate it and the impact it has on the community. And I know in having a conversation with the mayor, he's equally concerned and certainly supports the actions that we're taking today.
Chief, I don't know if you read some of the comments, but some citizens were concerned about having an officer out there who has these types of views, policing the city.
I understand that, but that officer, like every officer, is entitled to due process. And so I know there's some who would want me to rush to judgment and preliminary say this person should be dismissed. Is that fair? Does this man, like anyone else, faced with an allegation, they have the absolute right to due process.
There's something.
Now that doesn't mean, as I've done in this case, within at least 24 to 48 hours of becoming aware of it, I've already taken action. And that action is I've demoted former Detective Weekly. I've reassigned him and opened an investigation. I think that's moving pretty quick.
Is this a violation of the code of conduct or just bad use of words?
As we get into the investigation, we'll determine what specifically was violated. But certainly it doesn't represent what we stand as a department. We're striving for excellence. We're doing that. And as I've also said, is the department, are some of the members in the department going to make mistakes? Absolutely. I think people in your profession make mistakes. Sometimes you get the story wrong. Yes? Sometimes you misquote what the person you're interviewing, like the chief refuses to buy gas in Detroit. Remember that one, don't we? That was not what I said. But anyway,
That wasn't me. Don't look at me.
But on a more serious note, we're certainly committed to professionalism. We're striving and we're recognized as a constitutional police department. We recognize the seriousness of this, and we're certainly taking appropriate action.
Quick sidebar. Right now, the council president is trying to talk about this ordinance against vicious animals. Do you have any take on, whether or not there is an issue?
I am concerned about vicious animals in Detroit, but I haven't had a chance to look at this ordinance that's being introduced. I have not.
Something that you are concerned in what?
I'm always concerned about vicious animals. We've heard some of the horrible stories, loss of life, but I haven't seen it, so.
Too early for you to comment.
Yeah, too early. Thank you. All right.